What is the most Soviet thing you can think of? I would say censorship. I will for sure tell you about the censorship of books and cinema later, but the history of music censorship is interesting as well. Now, in the 50s, the so-called thaw made the Soviet government less strict towards people with a different mindset. And at the same time, rock and roll appeared for the first time, though officially all the new American music styles like boogie woogie, twist, and jazz were considered harmful to the youth. This is when the culture of Stilyagi appeared. They were mostly educated young men, but girls could participate as well. It was a subculture that focused around the overall American lifestyle, and this included the forbidden music. One of the most important parts of the Stilyagi culture was picking a costume. They specifically dressed up in the most colorful way they could, to oppose the rest of the citizens, the so-called grey masses. A typical outfit could consist of flared trousers, a green, purple or orange oversized blazer, a very thin tie, ironically called a little herring, an umbrella combined with a cane, and polished white shoes on high soles with the nickname Shoes with Semolina Porridge. Additionally, male Stilyagi specifically grew hair on the front, which they then put back in a very American-looking hairstyle, which was called cock. You see that I already mentioned two nicknames for things. Well, Stilyagi created them for literally everything they saw, and finally developed their own slang. There was a habit of shortening normal Russian words or just introducing English ones to it. This is why on the streets of large cities you could hear words like parente for parents and flat for flat. In many cities, the main street was even called Broadway. Of course, nobody else liked the Stilyagi in the country. They were, as a type of punishment, excluded from the Communist Party, fired from their jobs, or just publicly ridiculed. The government even organized the DND, Voluntary People's Militia, which could potentially arrest the Stiliaga, or even shave his head if the hair was too long. The writers published toxic feuilletons about them in newspapers. There even existed a propaganda slogan: if today he plays jazz, then tomorrow he will sell his fatherland. And this was not exactly a lie, because the Stilyagi were mostly either apolitical, pacifist, or completely negative towards the Soviet government. In the late 1950s, rock and roll was finally introduced, but the records of it weren't produced in the USSR. It was the music of the enemy. So those few records that were smuggled into the country were copied using self-produced recording devices onto X-ray pictures. They were much cheaper than the original plates, more flexible, and were in the slang called rock on the bones or skeleton of my grandma. Later, as the hippies became increasingly more and more popular, the Stilyagi were seen as old-timers and were not considered stylish anymore. Many of them established their own families, bought cars, and began working as high-rank officials in the Soviet government, as their parents did. The subculture of Stilyagi completely faded by the end of 60s. The grey masses have won, once again.